Hello, my lovely writers. How are you? Emma Desi here from Turning Readers into Writers. I hope you are well. I wanted to address an issue that I suspect a lot of people are going through right now, no matter where you are in the world. The world is in upheaval, everything's changing. I think many of us kind of recognize we're in a period of transition. Things are shifting, dominance in the world is moving, power is moving. It's all quite interesting and can be very frightening for some people as well. I got an email from a friend a few weeks ago who's saying, what do you do with your writing when you're feeling knocked off kilter, off track, that just something has come along in your life and it's completely knocked you off track, is the words that she used. And so she lives in America. There's been a lot of changes happening in America, the majority of which she is not happy with, and is feeling kind of really angry about it and feeling her need to do something about that being pulling her away from her writing. So this might be something that's happening to you. It might not be anything political that is pulling you away from your writing. It might be something more personal or more to do with your workspace, your paid job. That happens to all of us at some stage or other, where our energy, our physical energy, our mental energy gets pulled away from our writing. And can be tough because the stage that we're at in our writing, we don't have a publishing house saying you've got a deadline. This is your job, we're paying you to do this, you've got to get this book in. So giving us that external motivation, that external raison d'etre, if you like. We're doing this for ourselves. And so unless we sort of say to ourselves, this is my job, this is important to me, I want to get this book finished and out into the world, it can be easy to be swayed and have your direction pulled in other ways. So there's a choice that we get to make as creatives, as authors. And for every single person watching, it's going to be very different. Your life situation is going to be very different. It might be that you're at the stage of life where you've got young kids, and that is for sure pulling you away from your book. So you're going to have a much slower journey towards getting that book finished. Unless you've got help, domestic help, that can really take a lot of that day-to-day pressure away and give you that space and that time to do the writing, it's just going to be a slower process. And that's the same for absolutely everybody. It's pretty standard for it to take 7 years to write your first book. So if it takes you that long or longer, that's the way it goes. That is life. You're not doing anything wrong. If it's a work crisis, for example, or you've got somebody you're caring for who's going through a health problem, and that is hopefully going to be temporary, then it might mean, you put your book on the back burner for a little while. You don't get to spend as much time on it as you would like to. But I would encourage you to keep thinking about your book, keep jotting down notes about your story and about your characters. And when you do have a moment of respite, when things do feel easier and you kind of feel you've got the energy to get to do your writing, then you can step back into it and enjoy it. But like our young stay-at-home parents, that just slows your process down. It doesn't mean that you're never going to finish the book, but it is going to slow your process down. But again, this is a choice that we get to make. And I'm not saying these choices are easy, but we are grown-ups. We are individuals who have the ability to make a choice. Even when it's not an easy choice to make, we can do it. So either we choose that our priority is with our loved ones and their health and their upbringing, or it's with our paid job because we're feeling that that's a bit tenuous right now, or it's with our writing and we know that other things are going to have to give. One thing I've been learning as I get older, I think women for a long time now have been told you can have it all, and I'm learning that you can't have it all. There has to be give and take. We can't be domestic goddesses and Mother Earths and corporate ball breakers, for lack of another word, and a creative writer. We can't do everything in exactly the same way and giving it the same energy and time that we would like to. It's balanced. Everything's kind of got to flow. And sometimes our writing is going to take a back seat. Other times it's going to be absolutely forward and center. So these are choices that we make. And sometimes we make them reluctantly, but we do make them as choices. So Life is always going to throw things in your direction, and it's up to you as an individual, as an adult, as a grown-up, about how you respond to it and the decision you make based upon that. So that's kind of one thing I wanted to just talk about, is that practical decision making about where you're going to spend your energy and your time. So then there's two other things that I would quite like to just quickly talk about. And one is, so my friend is feeling, she's very politically active. She's very conscious about the world around her. She wants to make a difference and help preserve the planet, and the welfare of everybody around her, particularly because she's now, you know, got children, grandchildren, and she's thinking about the futures coming after her. And so we can get caught up, particularly if you are politically motivated or you're interested in current affairs. In this day and age, news is 24/7. You can watch it all day, every day if you want to. It's not like in the old days where, particularly here in the UK, you would have the news in the morning, you'd have lunchtime news, you'd have sort of tea time news around 6 o'clock, and then at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you'd have the evening news. So you would sort of tune in 3 or 4 times a day to see what was happening in the world. Now it's 24/7. And if you don't switch it off, it will engulf you. It will suck you in, and you'll end up in just this loop, this cycle of watching the same news again and again and again, which is just going to fuel your anger and your frustration, which then will detract your energy, pull your energy away from the creative life that you're wanting to be living. So in practical terms, I would say switch off the news. I've been given this advice from so many different people in so many different spheres and different industries, not just the creative ones. Switch off the news, stop watching it. If you need to know something, it will filter through to you. Somebody will tell you, you know, the other people who are watching the news, they'll tell you what you need to know. Either switch off the TV news or you buy a newspaper, and then you do it once a day and you see what you need to see. Be selective. If you can't quite bear the idea of switching off the news, that you do want to dip into it throughout the course of the day, be selective. Be selective either about the channels that you watch, and particularly the amount of time that you watch it. Don't let it suck you in. It's the equivalent of doom scrolling on your phone. It's the equivalent of just flicking through a social media platform, and before you know it, 3 hours have gone past and you've done nothing productive. You've not done any of the things that you want to do. So either switch the news off completely and trust that whatever you need to know will come through to you. Switch off TV news, get a newspaper, old-fashioned newspaper, and just read what you need to read. You'll learn about what you need to learn about. Or be selective about the times and the outlets from which you receive your news. So that's one way, just to kind of give yourself a bit of distance from what's going on in the world, so it doesn't just engulf you. But the third thing I want to say, because we're writers, I want to sort of talk about the idea of how we use our fiction, how we use our words to elicit change. Because we do, as writers, we do elicit change. Now, it might not be that you write your book and the very next day legislation has changed, that there is this big shift in public consciousness. That's really unlikely to happen. When we write our stories, we publish our stories, we contribute to a body of work. We contribute to a body of consciousness. And if enough people are writing stories about these topics, then it will get picked up in the social consciousness, and people will start talking about it, start noticing that people are saying things everywhere they look. That sort of confirmation bias, if you see what I mean. You know, we might read about climate change from a specific point of view, and then we notice that other people are talking about climate change from a specific point of view. The same with immigration, the same with biology and gender and women's rights. All of these things, we need to come to them from our own specific point of view and how we perceive these issues to be. When it comes to using fiction, using your words as a tool, as a sword, is you need to get specific about what it is that you want to change first. Because if you're angry about everything and you want to change everything all at once, no one's going to listen to that. That's just a rant. And that won't resonate with people. You need to choose one thing at a time that you are specifically angry about, and you relate it to an individual in your fiction. how is whatever it is whatever issue you want to write about, how is that impacting this one protagonist in your book? And how is it impacting them personally in their personal life, not at a societal level, but in their personal life? How is it impacting them? So I think a really good example of this would be immigration and migrants moving, economic migrants moving, because this is happening all over the world. So you might live in a community that is seeing migrants come in, and you're seeing the negative impacts of that. And you're seeing how it's having an impact on your local community and how your local community feels and the cohesiveness of that community. And it might just be from feeling safe walking down the street, but equally it can be things like getting a doctor's appointment. Is there enough infrastructure for the amount of people that are moving in? So there's all kinds of things that might be impacting that you are seeing in your community as immigrants are moving in, and you feel that they're taking over or reducing the kind of feeling of community that you've got in your community. So you choose a fictional person who lives in that community and is personally experiencing the changes that are happening in that community and how it's impacting them. Because when we get personal, that's where we get the empathy. That's where we see the empathy, and that's the bit that can elicit understanding, can elicit compassion from people who perhaps haven't started out sharing your point of view or seeing it from your point of view. But equally, if you're somebody who's very, very in favour in this of immigration and understands why people are making the moves that they're making, then you get to write about one individual, either who is the migrant, who is making that change and why they're making that change, what's propelling somebody to move thousands of miles away from their home and their family to a new land. It's not on a whim. It's not because they've nothing else to do on a Saturday afternoon. There's real reasons that they're doing it. So you could be writing about a character who's making that change. But equally, you could be writing about a character who lives where the migrant is coming to, and you're seeing the benefits of having this new migrant community in your community. And then again, you get to share that empathy, that compassion, that understanding, that humanness. And so people who don't necessarily agree with you get to see things from a different point of view. And this is how we start to elicit change, certainly elicit discussion and more empathy and more understanding on all sides of the spectrum. So if you're writing about gender issues or women's issues, or you're writing about the climate, whatever it might be, the economics are a huge thing right now. So, but pick an individual, a fictional individual, and write about their life. And that's how you begin to wield your pen like a sword. You make that change, but we all have to do it. We have to be a collective to do it. And it doesn't happen overnight. I'm going to just give some examples too. So I want to think about the examples that come to my mind are older. So my first example would be Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. So that was a not Dickensian, but a Victorian story about the treatment of animals in London and how badly they were treated, and the really miserable lives that many of them lived. And that did actually bring about a change in the law in the UK, and animal welfare was raised up the pecking order. But think about Dickens. I think he's a really great example. Charles Dickens, there was lots of things that he was angry about when he went around the UK and he went around the world. He went to America, spent a lot of time there. There were lots of things that he got angry about. But he would choose one issue at a time, maybe two, but one is certainly one issue at a time, and he would write about a specific individual in that situation and how it impacted that character. And that did, slowly, didn't elicit change immediately, but it certainly garnered discussion, and other writers were doing the same thing. And so we bring about change that way. But I'm aware that my examples are old, so I did want to kind of look up a few newer examples from the last 50 years. Beloved by Toni Morrison, that was a great book that really sort of brought, especially as it was so beautifully done, really brought the study of slavery into the forefront, brought it to people's consciousness a lot more. And so that starts a discussion. And, you know, in the last 50 years, we've seen so much change around that, and long may that continue. We think about The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. That was 1985. And that looked at women's rights and how women are treated in society. And who knew? Everything goes in cycles, but who knew that would come back to be such an important book and such an important message for us? My home country, Scotland, Irving Welsh wrote Trainspotting, and that really highlighted the very real impacts of poverty and drugs in low-income communities and how that is pulling communities down. And again, he just took some individuals and looked at the impact it was having on their specific lives, but it was a microcosm of what was happening across Scotland. I've also got an example, The Bone People by Kerry Hume, set in New Zealand, and it was looking at the Maori culture and the complexities around kind of identity and connection and fitting in New Zealand with imperialism and local culture, local Indigenous peoples. So again, raising that, making that us more aware. Many people across the world might not have been aware of this, or not in any real way. And thanks to fiction, thanks to books like that, we get to have more of an understanding. And again, a book called Cloud Street by Tim Winton, set in Australia. It looks at sort of Australian life. It looks at Australian families and identities, and how that differs. That family life there is going to be very different to family life in the UK. You know, even though there's a lot of cultural overlap, it's evolved and changed and it's become its own thing. Immigration coming in there as well, and of course the Indigenous peoples who live there too. So it's our fiction, whilst on the face of it might feel like they are just stories, they're not. They're a reflection of our society and what people are thinking about and what people are talking about in society. And if we have enough change, if we have enough of these stories, it does rise up into the social consciousness and people start to talk about it. And slowly but surely, we do become part of the voice of change. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. But again, decisions that we make, these are decisions that we get to make about the stories that are we going to write the story, first of all? Is it going to be important enough that we're going to write the story? And then what specific issue is our story going to deal with? And try and investigate and try and be part of that voice of change through the empathy, through the compassion, through the sharing of human stories or animal stories in the case of Black Beauty. So quite a weighty subject today, but for those of you who are feeling the weight of these big kind of global issues that are going on, or even your community issue, you're really seeing things happen and change in your community and you're not happy about it, or you're happy about it, talk about it, put it in your fiction, write about it, but be specific and boil it down to one individual and how those issues are impacting that one individual in your book. Woo! All right, enough for me for just now, I think, but I hope you found that useful, and I hope it's given you a bit of courage to either make the decision to put your writing to one side without feeling bad about it, or to say, no, I've got something I want to say and I want to be part of that global voice. I want to be standing on the shoulders of giants, and we're going to have our say and hopefully bring about some change. If not today, then tomorrow. All right, take care for now, my lovelies, and I'll see you soon. Bye.